Hey everybody, and welcome back. So in the previous video, we took a look at where we can get our hands on those FBX assets that we will be using for the remainder of this video series. And we also created our project, which I have up on screen at the moment. In this video, we are going to import those FBX assets, and we're also going to pause for a moment to talk a little bit about skeletons and how they're used inside Unreal Engine 4. So let's continue inside of our project here. The first thing that we're going to do is actually hop down to the content browser, which, as the name suggests, allows us to browse all of the content inside of our project. First thing we're going to do is right click on the root content folder here, and we're going to create a new folder. And we're going to call this folder the character folder. And this folder is going to hold all of the assets pertaining to our character, just to keep things nice and neat and organized. Now I'm going to hop off screen for just a second and open the folder on my desktop that is containing those FBX assets that I downloaded. We pop that up. And once you've extracted that zip file, here are all those assets. The first one that we're going to actually import is the sk_mannequin. This is the skeletal mesh asset. So there's a number of different ways we can import this. We could click import here on the content browser, but probably the easiest is just to left click and drag and drop that directly into the content browser. And when I release, you can see that we are presented with a dialog box. And this is the FBX import options dialog box. Now the cool thing is that Unreal has recognized that we are attempting to import a skeletal mesh, and it's giving us a bunch of options to kind of define how we import that mesh. So once we start importing animations in a moment, you can see we'll get different settings that pertain to animations and how we import those. Now most of these settings we're going to leave as default. But there is one setting that I wanted to talk about here, take just a moment to talk about here, and that is the skeleton setting. As you can see, it's currently set to none. So we're going to pause for a second to talk a little bit about skeletons and how they're used in Unreal Engine 4. One thing I'm going to do actually is kill this import options box. You can leave it up if you're following along with this video, but if I don't, I'm going to get some artifacts here when I hop over to PowerPoint land here in a moment. So I'm going to kill this just for now, but you can leave yours up and follow along with the video. So I'm going to open my PowerPoint presentation. I promise it's really short. It's not too long. So let's go ahead and get through this really quickly and talk about how skeletons are used. If you are already familiar with animations, say in 3ds Max or Maya, or any number of other 3D animation tools, you're probably already familiar with the concept of skeletal meshes in the sense of them being some type of object that defines points of rotation on a 3D model. That model ends up getting skinned or in some way bound to those bones or joints, depending on what animation tool you come from. In Unreal, they are referred to as bones, but just know if you hear the term joints or bones thrown around, it basically means the same thing. So skeletons in Unreal are basically just that. They are a list of bone names with some hierarchy data, so it knows who is parented to what. The reason this is important to you is that skeletons are the way that animations can be shared in Unreal Engine 4. That is very important. I'm going to put a gold star next to it. There are some rules to remember when sharing animations between skeletons. To share animations typically as a best practice and to make your life easier down the road, you'll want your characters to use the same skeleton asset. So any skeletal meshes that you import, if possible, you want them to share the same skeleton asset. That way, those animations can be passed between the different skeletal meshes without any extra work. Now, as a side note to this, as of Unreal Engine, I think it's version 4.5 or later, there is a feature that will allow you to retarget animations between characters that use different skeleton assets. However, there is an extra step involved when doing so. As I mentioned, characters that use the same skeleton asset can automatically share their animations with other characters without any extra work. But I did want to mention retargeting just in case you come across a situation where you have characters that are using different skeleton assets. Now the good news is this skeleton asset gets automatically created when you import a skeletal mesh. You don't actually have to go through any extra work or stuff to make one. It's going to happen for you automatically. The reason that we want to take just a second to talk about them, and you may already be thinking this, is that not all of your characters are going to be the same. they are not going to have the exact same joint layout. So if you're worried about that right about now, this is why I kind of wanted to pause for a second to talk about them for just a moment here. So if we have two different characters, let's say this is our base character that kind of defines our generic, base character that all skeletal meshes use. You can see it has a head, it has shoulders and arms and legs and feet, and so forth. But let's say we had another character that was going to have a ponytail. So there's our ponytail. You can see it's got a joint coming out of the back of the head and a bunch of bones for the hair and so forth. It kind of looks like a ponytail. This is totally fine. You could totally do this. If you had two skeletal meshes, the one with the ponytail could use the same skeleton as the one without the ponytail. And there's no problem in doing this. These two characters using that same skeletal asset, Unreal will automatically know that they are the same, and that this here is just an additional appendage, so to speak. It won't affect the initial character. So if you import the first character, he's got the white skeleton here, and you import the second character with the ponytail, and you tell the second character to use that first skeleton asset, these joints will just get appended or added onto that skeleton asset and everything will be fine. The characters that don't have a ponytail will just not use that data. It's just not a problem at all. What is a problem, however, is if you brought in another character that had some more bones, say spine joints, for example, or maybe rolled joints in the middle of the hips and shin, and maybe some on the upper arms and lower arms, because sometimes that's the way people rig their characters. They'll add those additional bones in their character for more control. This is actually problematic because you are breaking the order of the hierarchy. So the skeleton asset would look at this list and say, okay, you have some extra things in here. I don't think that these are compatible. So that's a little bit of a problem. So long as you are doing extra things, like adding things such as a ponytail or maybe extra arms or a tail or wings or things like that, then you can certainly use the same skeleton. That's kind of the misconception when people are first getting started with Unreal Engine 4 and importing their characters. They think they need a skeletal mesh and a skeleton per skeletal mesh. So they're creating a bunch of different skeletons and applying all those skeletons to individual skeletal meshes when in fact they could be sharing those and sharing animation, just saving you a lot of work. So the takeaway here is that if there are extra joints that are going to disrupt the base hierarchy, then that's when you would need to create an entirely new skeleton, which may mean that you may need different animations or go through that process of retargeting animations, as I mentioned before. So with that, now that we've established kind of as a general topic what skeletons are, we can hop back over to Unreal and continue importing our skeletal mesh. So we'll go ahead and hit escape and hop out of PowerPoint. And let me bring back up my folder with my FBX assets. And let's drag and drop in that SK mannequin and get our FBX import options dialog open again. There's some more artifacts. I didn't know I was going to do that there. If you're seeing those artifacts, that's because I am video recording. So the joys of video recording is producing these extra effects here, although it's kind of neat when you look at it. So if you can ignore that for a moment, it'll go away in a second when we import. So we're going to leave skeleton as none because we want to create one when we import our skeletal mesh here. I did want to open this advanced section here. There's a bunch of options in here, but there's one I wanted to change. This normal import method. We're going to import normals. Now yours may have been set to compute normals. If Unreal computes normals, it may create some hard edges on our mesh here, which I don't want. I'm just going to import normals and move my window up, and I'm going to hit import to import our skeletal mesh. Now you may see a warning here when you do so. You can see it says no smoothing group information was found in this FBX and so forth. You could click this little button here to open documentation on it, but basically what it's saying is it didn't see any normals on this character, which is fine. I knew it didn't have any normals to begin with. So you can go ahead and close this window. And inside of our content browser, you can see that our skeletal mesh has been added, along with some additional options here, or assets here. First thing that it also created is a physics asset. And this is used when you want to create any kind of like ragdoll effects for this skeletal mesh, like if you had a ragdoll death animation or something. We're not going to be doing that in this video series, but just wanted to point it out that it's there. And then there's our skeleton asset. This is the important asset that we can use between different skeletal meshes if we had them to pass animations between those characters. Now it also created some materials that can be applied to our skeletal mesh here. If I actually open it, let's double click and open it. The window actually opened off screen, so I'm going to drag that in. This is Persona. So we are now inside the Persona editor, and we are in the mesh tab of Persona. I could, inside my viewport here, hold Alt and kind of drag around with my left mouse button so you can kind of fly around the character here. And if I click the Skeleton tab, now we are looking at the skeleton, and there's all those bones that we talked about inside our skeletal mesh here. And I'm actually going to close this now because we don't really need... We're going to go into Persona in the next video, actually, so kind of break that down a little bit better in that video. So let's continue. Let's actually open that folder containing our FBX assets. And inside here, I'm just going to hold Control and hit A to select all of them, and hold Control and unselect our mannequin. Now that we have all of our animations selected, I'm going to drag all of those into the content browser here. Actually, you know what? Before I do that, for organizational purposes, I'm going to right-click on the character folder here and create a new folder and call it Animations. And now we're going to import those animations, or those FBX assets, into the Animations folder. So there's our friend, the FBX Import Options dialog. And look what it's asking us for. It's asking us for a skeleton. And we created one when we imported the skeletal mesh. So we can click this drop down here, and there's our skeleton asset. So let's go ahead and select that. And the rest of these options, we're going to leave those as default, and we're going to hit Import All. It's going to take a second for it to import all of those assets. Now, there is another warning here. Kind of wanted you to see this. It says, the following bones exist in the imported animation, but not in the skeleton SK mannequin, and so forth. The character that was used for the punches, the punching sequence, had a coat, and that's those extra bones that we were talking about. Our character does not have that coat, so it's just going to ignore all of these, which is fine. So we can go ahead and close this. And inside the content browser, you can see all of our assets have these little asterisks on them. This is letting you know that these assets have not been saved. So go ahead and click the Save All button to save all of our assets. It's going to open up a Save dialog. And then go ahead and click Save Selected. That'll save all of our assets. So I think that's a good time to pause here. We're about 13 minutes in. We've imported all of our assets now. We've talked about what skeletons are and how they're used to share animations inside Unreal Engine 4. And we've also imported those animations. We have everything ready. In the next video, we're going to talk about Persona and start setting up some of the things that we'll need for our character. So let's break here, and we will see you in the next video.